Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the UPRT webinar on upset recovery strategies. These strategies are designed to mitigate the threat of loss control events that still remain the number one cause of fatal accidents worldwide. So my name is Jeff Wofford. I've been a career business aviation pilot and flight instructor for the last 46 years, and I've been involved with UPRT for almost 20 years. And so today we're joined by a panel of experts in the field of UPRT. First is Captain Dave Carbo. He's a former U.S. Air Force fighter pilot. He's an airline pilot and has been involved with UPRT as an instructor and implementer of these policies for many years. And Dave is also chairman and president of UPRT International. We also have Captain Clark Otter McNeese. Otter is a former naval aviator and flew the F-18 and flew for the airlines and then joined APS and is an instructor providing UPRT instruction. And we also have Captain Paul B.J. Ransberry, former Canadian Air Force F-18 pilot, airline pilot, and the founder and president and chairman of APS, a leading provider of UPRT. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Carbo and let him talk to you about our sponsors and get us started.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your locale on the planet. Today is the second quarter 2026 webinar presented by the Upset Prevention and Recovery Training Association International. Today's topic is the Unified Upset Recovery Strategy, and it's sponsored by Aviation Safety Compliance, Strike Flyers, Safety Operating Systems, and CAE. Loss of control in flight remains aviation's leading cause of fatal accidents. What we'll hear about today is that guidance worldwide varies between regulators, OEMs, and instructors. We aim to consolidate that guidance. When we are flying, we're always trying to maintain control and trying to prevent an upset, but sometimes environmental conditions, malfunctions, or pilot errors cause us to be upset. It will be a startling, fast-paced, and variable situation for which we must be prepared for. Procedures exist, but with only seconds to interpretize, prioritize, and act, pilots need a strategy in order to execute properly under these conditions. Our speakers will present this unified strategy as a useful tool in order to properly execute upset recovery. So let's begin. On to you, Otter.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Jim and BJ. It's great to be with you guys. This is a really fascinating topic, I think, because largely it's a fairly recent technology for us in flight training. The concept of actually having a unified upset recovery strategy applicable to fixed wing aircraft, and again, not only just fixed wing, we're talking about all types of fixed wing aircraft, from Cessnas to King Airs to 737s, is really a very recent innovation here. And so we want to talk about this because I feel like that the industry has of late been willing to discuss this and the value of it. I know when BJ and I were in our early days, a couple decades ago, this was not a topic at large, and there were still many industry stakeholders that simply did not believe that you could have, say, one type of strategy that was applicable to literally the infinite variety of upsets that we all know we could get in as pilots. I mean, there literally is an infinite variety of upsets, and it's just not possible to train to all of those individually. So anyway, we're going to be looking at slides that will trace how stall and upset templates, OEM procedures, and regulatory guidance are unified into one prioritized recovery strategy here. Let's go to the next slide. what is a unified strategy and what is it not? I'm hoping we'll be able to cover this relatively quickly here for the audience. We don't certainly need to spend a long time on it, although we certainly could, and we could all have discussions for many hours on it. But a unified strategy is a way of thinking. It's not necessarily a maneuver. And when we say unified strategy, we're really talking about a unified recovery strategy, although it can be used in prevention as well. There, it's a single decision-making framework for all upset conditions, and a key word here is all here. And that's kind of hard to believe that literally just about every upset you could get in, you could actually fall back on a strategy again here with this. But that's what we're saying. That's what we're promoting here. There, we're also saying that this strategy prioritizes aerodynamic fundamentals before the symptoms. So it gives a pilot in a time critical, life threatening situation, a very dynamic situation that quite possibly he's never even experienced before in a real airplane there, and maybe not even seen it in a simulator there, but it gives him the ability to capture, keep in mind certain aerodynamics and physics that have to play out to recover the airplane there. It reduces hesitation during startle, surprise, and time pressure. I know Dave, Jeff, you can certainly appreciate this, that we all know when we end up in a high pressure cooker situation, if we don't already have a game plan that's kind of embedded and ingrained in us, we may not take action. We might freeze. We might certainly just simply do the wrong thing. Go with gut instinct, and that may hurt us in the end. It also simplifies recognition, diagnosis, and prioritization and action. It really does. When you have a relatively simple strategy that you can fall back on, that you've been trained in, that's been ingrained in you, it truly simplifies this time critical situation. And we've even gotten that from multiple testimonies of went through training. Sorry, guys. So went through real upsets, and they said that they applied the strategy, and when they applied the strategy, it was like in slow motion to them. Life actually did slow down. It was like they were able to keep up with what to do. But you guys want to speak to any of this at all before we move on?
Otter, I think it's important that the strategy is in place so that if a pilot is actually taking some kind of action that's not working and you get in an upset, instead of just hesitating and not changing your game plan and doing a proper recovery, with a strategy, you have a place to go to when things aren't working right.
Yeah, totally agree. Jeff, did you?
Yeah, I mean, having that strategy makes all the difference in the world. I mean, we actually had an upset event. I don't know, about a year after I went to my first UPRT course, and then I just gotten one of my junior co-pilots back, and we got into an upset. And having that strategy, it was instantaneous. We didn't have to think about what to do. And obviously the recovery was successful. And but having to try to think through these things as it's happening is the wrong time. Having these strategies in advance is extremely important, and it reduces that cognitive lag we have when we're trying to figure something out. So absolutely having a unified strategy and a way to go about this without having to do all the calculations and everything else makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Let's talk briefly here a second about what it's not.
That's coming up at the end of the presentation.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to the next.
If you don't mind, though, Otter, I think maybe for the people watching is to understand that you had mentioned that it's fairly recent. That said, for example, APS introduced a unified strategy in 2002, and then IATA actually formalized it in their best practices and upset prevention recovery training over a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And so while it's new to many providers, virtually every progressive UPRT operator, whether that's an air carrier or a training school, whatever it might be, has a version of a unified strategy, simply because it's a best practice to be successful in a startling, surprising time pressure situation, to be able to take inventory of what's going on and getting it back to the heart of the envelope. And so I think that while it is new to people maybe on this event, for UPRT providers, it is a long proven effective approach to actually being able to transform what is typically a difficult, convoluted, murky event into something that's very crystal clear in how to take effective action. And so I think that's really important to share with everybody. So with that, let's move on. Here you go, on.
Agreed. So these documents here, which came out at various times, the ICAO doc does, it's an excellent document talking about how to deliver upset prevention recovery training. And it's an overarching document, gives a great framework and structure to the kinds of knowledge and skill tasks that need to be addressed there. This one came out in 2014 after several years that industry stakeholders worked to address loss control in flight and figure out what do we need to do about it. That started by the Royal Aeronautical Society back in 2009. And so anyway, it's a great document. The FAA came out with their advisory circular 120-109 back in 2012 originally. This is 109 Alpha, which has been updated. And this was largely, Dave and I had a chance to actually be co-authors on this. And this was an interesting group to be in because we were trying to look at stalls, how the industry trains stalls. What are we doing? Are we doing anything wrong? What do we need additionally to do? What are our resources? How to better prepare pilots for preventing and recovering from stalls? And we had some really interesting discussions, didn't we? In that group. Do you have any initial thoughts on this?
No, it was a lot of experts, not only people from airlines and that understood the training world, but also some flight test people that were involved that actually had a lot of experience with upsets and stalls. And I think we got the great body of information there.
We did. And one of the things that was very enlightening was for us to truly realize that you cannot train full stalls in simulators. and airline pilots can't go there unless they have an enhanced stall model. Now that's required now as of April 2019 for Part 121 carriers. But the point is that to learn that most stall modeling was not, most stall characteristics in the simulators were not representative of the aircraft type. So the advisory circular 121-11 was on upset training, UPRT, and it gave guidance on not only how to handle stalls, largely deferring to the previous advisory circular, but on nose high and nose low upsets. And both of these documents give recovery templates there, which we're going to look at and see how we're going to be able to take the recovery templates that are actually in these documents and flow them into the unified strategy, see how they meld here. Let's look first at the ICAO document here. And well, I guess I'll say right off the bat, BJ, maybe you could jump in here on this, but we need to remember that an upset recovery does require stages. You can't make things happen in an airplane all at once. Even though the pilot wants to, even though the pilot wants to get the airplane back to normal envelope like now, you just simply can't do that. And there are aerodynamics and physics at play, energy, all of that has to be managed. And so, BJ, you want to talk briefly about those stages here?
Yeah, no, I think that we had talked about this yesterday. Is that it's really about a process. It's a sequential process of staying organized because the human being in crisis can only really deal with one thing at a time, and so it really needs to be ingrained in through training. So I think the one misleading element of this might be is that this is something that we just stick in the cockpit, and when we need it, we pull it out and do a read and do process. That's not really what the strategy is, even though it's presented here in that kind of sequential format. The intent is for the pilot not to have to reference anything other than their training to be able to take an effective action to correlate what they are doing to line up with the OEM industry produced guidance on effective upset training. So the strategy does not replace existing guidance. What it does, it gives them a tool by which they can take effective action in a crisis. So as we look down on the left side, there's some fundamental elements. It's recognizing and confirming the situation, calling out the situation, especially in a CRM environment, and then getting automation out of the way, or in some airplanes, and maybe even more so in the future, letting automation take the corrective action if it can. But I think the part that's really important here, Otter, that we need to emphasize is angle of attack is the centerpiece to the actual aerodynamic actions of the strategy. Is that if angle of attack is the issue, we have to start there. And in many, many, many situations, it is. Now, it doesn't mean we always have to take action if angle of attack is not an issue, but it needs to be considered first. So, for example, to be able to effectively manage angle of attack, the lift vector, angle of attack has to be in the normal range, or it's going to have some issues with it. And the other thing is that, also with power management, get ahead of our skis on power management, but we're in a stall, for example, an underwing mounted transport category airplane, we actually make it worse. And so the strategy is the best compromise across a wide diversity of situations, have the highest likelihood of a very positive outcome. And so as we go through this, I think the only thing that I would bring to everybody's attention would be that it is all founded on angle of attack. It is the centerpiece of this. You can see everything else is wrapped around it. Before angle of attack, you're building situational awareness. You're now getting automation out of the way, but the first action you're taking is an angle of attack process, and then you go through it from that point forward. So anything else to add in that, Otter? And I can start revealing the horizontal analysis that will lead us to the unified strategy.
No, I'll say two things related to that, because you mentioned, I think, an important concept, and that's especially important for any pilot listening to this that's not used to or has not been trained this way, and that it is a unified strategy is a compromise, because there are sets you could get out there where a recovery technique that's slightly varied from this would be, say, more efficient, certainly. But considering all things from aerodynamics to human factors, it is a very good compromise. The other thing I was going to mention is angle of attack. And Dave and Jeff, this from training and training pilots. Getting pilots to understand the angle of attack has been a challenge at large for us in the industry because, well, one, airplanes in general have not had angle of attack indicators. And so pilots don't know what the angle of attack is doing in various flight conditions, especially dynamic flight conditions like an upset. They might understand it for, quote, normal flight, 1G normal flight. But once things begin to be dynamic, the angle of attack understanding by pilots at large seems to be pretty lacking. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Otter, you're right on that. And the dynamic situation makes it almost impossible for a normal pilot, whether he be a private pilot or an airline guy, to actually understand where they are in the angle of attack regime. So, yeah,
Yeah.
very important.
And that's frankly one of the main goals of a good UPRT program is giving pilots much clearer understanding of angle of attack, what is going on with the angle of attack, and how to manage it. All right, because so many pilots associate angle of attack with speed, and that's not necessarily the case. They're completely independent variables. Okay. Let's go to the ICAO Doc 111 here and look at their deferred recovery strategy as it relates to stalls. And again, they're deferring to AC 120-109, and we can see it's to disconnect the auto flight system. This is going to be a common one, and certainly one that has to be done. You certainly do want to try to recover an airplane with the auto flight system going. You can see they say to apply nose down pitch control until the stall indications cease. That's pretty well written, although there's a lot more that needs to be taught with that. There, Dave, I know you saw this in training airline pilots in the simulator as it relates to stalls. The unload, as this is trying to refer to, can vary from pilot to pilot and what that looks like.
And it also varies depending on the condition experienced. If you're a clean, high altitude airliner guy, the nose down pitch is going to be fairly extreme before the stick shaker goes away. 25 degrees nose low or more. Where if you got flaps down, probably only around 10 degrees. So there's some variability there, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what training is why training is needed as we apply these strategies. So we're not going to delve too in the weeds on each of these steps. The next step is lift factor orientation. They don't mention how to level the wings here necessarily, but they do say to do that. Energy thrust as necessary. Retract speed brakes is next. The next step is gentle action for recovery to avoid a secondary stall. So this is where they're typically now going to be pulling away from the ground, getting the nose back up since they're losing altitude at this point, and return the airplane back to the desired flight path. All right, let's go to the next one here. This is the nose low upset. This template is in document 111. Again, they recommend to recognize and confirm the situation there and even potentially call out nose low. They again recommend disconnecting auto flight system. They also recommend here reduce angle of attack to recover from the stall if required. Interesting, because we are talking about a nose low upset. A lot of pilots might think, well, wait a minute, we're nose low, how can we be stalled? Well, we can be. We can stall at any attitude, right? There. And so it's simply a reminder here to pilots to remember that it's not just about solving attitude in an airplane. We got to solve angle attack first if it's a problem, i.e. like a stall. Next is lift factor orientation. Again, rolling in short directions. Energy, thrust, and drag is next if required there. Again, this needs to be taught pretty extensively depending on the upset, because, I mean, you think about coming out of a stall nose low, you might want to add power, but we don't typically think that way. We think in the brown, power down, right? So if your nose is low, we're typically pulling the power, but we might not want to do that here. Excessive pitch trim or rudder may aggravate the upset, and then recover to level flight may require pitch trim. All right. Nose high, again, starts off similar, recognize, confirm, gives a recommended call out, nose high, there, and then disconnecting the auto flight system. It does recommend, again, applying nose down control inputs to obtain nose down pitch rate. Now, this is very much, again, an angle of attack management step here. right? Just like the other one was nose low. We're considering angle of attack first. But again, this is not necessarily taught that way in the industry. A lot of times pilots are given, a nose high unusual attitude, and they've been taught, hey, you need to add power. That's the first thing you do, is just add power. Or nose low, you pull the power there. So this template is recommending that potentially we need to unload here because stall is the imminent threat. The next step is energy. The next step is, if required, let's see, for nose down pitch rate, roll up to 60 degrees angle of bank. So this one's interesting, I think, for a lot of pilots there, because you don't have to roll if you're unloaded. Although, in other words, do a wings level push, a wings level unload could bring the nose down sufficiently to recover from a nose high upset. Dave, Boeing kind of made a little bit of switch on this, didn't they? I mean, you guys used to teach a nose high recovery where you would have the pilots roll into a high bank, typically. And didn't y'all make a switch to a wings level push only?
Well, we encountered situations when we were in testing, et cetera, that sometimes, even though you were using up to full forward column to try to get the nose down, your pitch trim horizontal stabilizer could end up in a situation where you're unable to achieve a nose down pitch rate, wings level. And in that case, you needed to roll in order to get the nose to fall. We determined that 60 degrees of bank, at least in the transport category airplane, always brought the nose down at that point. So we recommend, if you are trying to achieve a nose down pitch rate, if you are not successful with up to full forward column on the wings level situation, to go ahead and roll into the bank and allow the nose to fall down to the horizon.
Great. Okay. That kind of brings us to this unified upset recovery strategy here. And we can see the proposed strategy is, again, the same. Recognize, confirm the situation here. I can tell you, as a UPRT instructor, this is definitely one of the more challenging things to get pilots to do, is take the time, sit on your hands, a couple of potatoes here, and recognize, confirm. Don't just start grabbing the controls and there until you've assessed. Make a call out. Most of us are flying multi-crew many times, and the call out is a very appropriate thing to do to get the other pilot on the same page, and for him to even confirm that he agrees with you on the upset. Disconnect the auto flight system. And then again, angle of attack should be the first thing that's assessed and managed for the airplane, for the upset or recovery. As long as everything else that follows is done within that context, things are going to go well, actually, throughout the recovery. Reorienting the lift factor using primarily ailerons, not rudder. They're managing energy, taking into account pitching moments from airplane to airplane, like underwing mounted engine airplanes, or even high torque turboprop airplanes like Jeff's flying, that Pilatus PC-12, right? And then once that is done, stabilizing the flight path, divergence there, and putting the airplane back into the normal envelope or desired, with a desired configuration there. So, BJ, you want to tap on anything here at this point in this?
Well, I think what I bring attention to is these blue areas right in here. You'll notice that the sequence of energy and lift vector management got flipped around, and that happens from time to time. Now, the FAA versions don't do that. We're going to come to that next. But the point is, you'll see this little cross over here in the unified strategy is angle of attack management is always the first consideration, then situation dependent. You may be managing lift vector or energy first. It doesn't really matter at this point. You want to be addressing them in sequence. And I think that's really important to understand. The only other thing I would mention here is this: when it says to adjust energy, we're not talking about adding power necessarily, right? If you think about it, we already mentioned nose high underwing mounted airplane, low altitude. Putting power on can actually make the situation worse, not better. Think about Jeff and his PC-12. Low speed, nose high, going full power can create a torque roll effect, and again, start causing problems. So it's really important that comprehensive training occurs, that you understand how to apply these strategies based on what, where, and how you operate. So for example, it's not one thing applies to every situation. You have to learn a unified upset recovery strategy in the context of platform that you are operating. While 95% of it is transferable across fixed wing airplanes, that 5% that's type or class specific can be all the difference between surviving and not. So understanding your airplane is really, really critical. So I think the only thing there, Otter, was bringing attention to that cross. And if you see at the bottom of this chart, it says priority order of energy and lift vector management can vary based on the flight condition. Now at APS, we would call that, the all attitude strategy, then the variant, the baseline and the variant. But at the end of the day, with all the airlines we've worked with, they all know this and they all went with a single strategy. So it's important to understand that even switching a couple of these things around, they considered the best compromise was keeping the same order no matter what they're facing. And as it turned out, when you look at the FAA advisory circulars, not the ICAO version, they all line up. So the point is the industry guidance is generally the same. These are techniques. These are templates. The OEM may be slightly different, but the point of it is that you understand this resource, this unified strategy in the context of startle, surprise, and time pressure to organize yourself to be effective. So anything else, Otter? I just wanted to add that before we go to the US version.
Yeah, no, that's super important. The other thing too is, as well as pilots see, once they've learned the strategy and they understand the overall picture of each of the steps, they also see that those two steps right there, lift vector orientation and energy, can be done at the same time there. And it may be best served that way, especially in a nose low over banked upset where they're having to roll upright. While they're rolling upright, they can be adjusting power. Okay, let's move on and let's look at the FAA world here. We'll look at the Advisory Circular 12109. This has been out since 2012. And we can see for stall recovery, again, they recommend disconnecting the auto flight system. There was no guidance on call outs there, but that is hopefully self-evident to most people there. And then again, apply nose down pitch control until stall indications cease. We got lift vector orientation again after that. Energy management through thrust and speed brakes. And then now, hopefully, the airplane's got the energy it needs to begin the recovery back to a flight path, a desired flight path.
So, Otter, if I could just jump in, I think one of the things to note here is that this chart going from ICAO International to FAA US centric is identical except for these two steps are reversed. Everything is identical on this slide to ICAO except these two where they interchange lift vector and energy, resulting in the same unified strategy. Looks like a formatting issue here with the callouts, but at the end of the day, you arrive at the same position. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have the APS version of the 25-year-old version of it coming up in a minute. But the point is now that you can see whether you look at EASA, whether you look at IATA, whether you look at ICAO, we look at the FAA, they all line up to realize that a overarching strategy is a mental organization tool, drives you into the template, the techniques in a way that is going to be the best compromise, as you put it, Otter.
Great. All right. Here's the APS all attitude upset recovery strategy, and we've been teaching this for a lot of years. As BJ mentioned earlier, we learned very quickly that a strategy was paramount to the success of a pilot in a startling upset, and so we've taught variants of strategies through the years here. This one in particular, we started. Was it BJ was back in 2012? Was this variant came out?
Well, 2002 is when we started with the unified strategy, but it evolved. It started pressure, power, rudder, roll, climb, went to different variations of it. In fact, I remember Dave coming down with Larry Rockcliffe in 2008, and we had the exact same strategy we have now, except we had rudder in it. And their reference to us was get rudder out. And our point was, can't you see rudder has an X through it? I remember that conversation. And they said, don't even bring it up. Don't even get the pilots thinking about rudder because it's the wrong thing to be doing. And so we went from 5 steps to 4. And I think that was a big improvement. Then in 2015, the year you're talking about, Otter, is what we did is this exact process we did here. And even though at the time we felt like we had a more effective strategy, overall, we aligned what we taught with industry to make sure that when people come through APS, as one example, when they leave, it should line up with industry guidance. So the only thing I'll add is we're not here to promote the APS all attitude upset recovery strategy, and the words are not the strategy. You can pick any word you want. Instead of push, you can go unload. You can say reduce angle of attack, whatever it might be. The point is a mental cue to take steps forward. And so I think that's a really important point. Because somebody uses certain words does not mean that the strategy is being embedded necessarily in training. They're two different topics. The veneer of the strategy is the word. The devil's in the details, so to speak. So
it absolutely is. You know, when we were working with KLM there, and they elected to use the word unload instead of push. And what was fascinating was they learned a lesson there that word unload meant different things to their pilots there. And so the word unload really ended up having to be heavily trained. It was just not an intuitive thing for their pilots, depending on their background. But you're exactly right, BJ. I mean, the word itself is designed as just a mental trigger word to bring in the reminder of the aerodynamic principle and the flight control that we should be potentially using at this part in the recovery.
So the only thing I'll add there, Otter, maybe Dave can jump in, is that stabilize means different things depending on where you are. What I mean by that is, for example, in a high altitude thrust limited condition, stabilizing can be a stabilized descent, at or above climb Mach going down to the next flight level. At lower altitudes, it can mean leveling off. At low altitude, stabilize can be stabilized climb. The point is you're stabilizing the airplane in control of the intended trajectory that you want for that airplane. And it's not always climbing, it's not always level, and it's rarely descending, but sometimes it can be. The point I would make there, that those 4 steps are how you diagnose the airplane back into the heart of the envelope for stability. And then notice the recovery complete stage. Now you're starting to increase your awareness. Gears up, flaps up, speed brakes in, trims. There's different things now. You're increasing your awareness of the condition of the airplane. So you're going right back down to the grassroots crocodile mind, getting back in control of the airplane. Then as you get near the end of the process, you're now expanding your situational awareness as the pilot, then as the crew, then as the situation.
Excellent. What is the next?
Well, I think we have that example from the A340 upset, Otter, if you would like, but we can go to the next one and talk about what it's not and cautions if you like before that.
Okay, yeah, let's touch on that because I know the other guys certainly would like to speak into this. What a unified strategy is not is it changes neither the physics nor the procedures. A strategy is not designed to teach pilots something that's counter to what's already being asked of them, either by the POH, the QRH, or their company procedures. Really, it's really designed to help them be able to do what's already being asked. There is not a new procedure, checklist, or fixed technique. It's not a replacement for OEM or regulatory guidance. It's not a merging of distinct aerodynamic conditions. It's not applicable to spin recovery. That is definitely the case. So we are talking about literally just about all parts of the flight envelope that you could end up in, except a spin. Right? Once an aircraft has entered a spin, you are in a very distinctive part of the flight envelope that requires an alternate control strategy or recovery strategy that's very different than what we are proposing here. So spins are out of scope. Just so everybody understands here. Don't think we're trying to capture that. And it's not a mandatory fixed set of words either, as we just discussed. It's not about the words itself. Words we see we didn't used to make our customers talk through a recovery. We used to just teach them recovery and hope they could replicate it and all that. But we certainly found from the learning process, from the focus that they are able to do throughout the recovery, they are well served by verbalizing the actual strategy itself. And I think we see that we've proven that over and over again, haven't we, gentlemen, in aviation? And, we never read a checklist silently anymore, certainly not an emergency checklist there.
Well, the other thing, Otter, is the say and do technique. We call that a recall technology, right? So before we implemented the say and do technique with the strategy, people would go through the training program, they get a skill set, they get the wow factor, but 2 years later, they come back like they've never had the training before. And the key to it sticking was the say and do technique. So, for example, in a program that we deliver, if we wake somebody up on their second night at midnight, they'll wake up saying, push, roll, power, stabilize. They will, because it's ingrained, right? Because that's what gets the mind working to contain startle, overcome surprise, be effective to access skill set in crisis. That it can't overemphasize the importance of the say and do integration with the strategy itself. While they are simple, they're dealing with very complex, widely diverse situations.
That's what us Navy guys need, right, Jeff? Simple.
Absolutely. KISS. Keep it simple.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Hey, Otter, before we go to the example of the A340, there's a comment here by Scott, which I think is a great one, but it's going to be a great intro to Dave's comment about how a strategy needs to be comprehensive, even though it seems very, very simple here, is that if we miss an element, that can make all the difference between surviving and not. And so, Dave, I think I'm just going to bring up Scott's technique. Unload, roll, pull, we've seen before, or even the military, what's it called? That's it, the ERP technique, right? But we have to be cautious of not missing a fundamental feature such as energy management. So let me just bring Scott's point up, because Scott, this is a great example of what organizations are doing to try to implement a strategy, but sometimes we have to be careful of not oversimplifying it. So here's the point that he made here, Scott. Thank you for saying this. His 121 sim training: unload, roll, nearest horizon, recover, pull. And I think, Dave, you wanted to talk about maybe some of the events. Let me hand it over to you, Dave, with the example you wanted to talk about.
Well, the example that I wanted to talk about is one that started a lot of this upset recovery training stuff. It's a U.S. Air 427 into Pittsburgh 737, and they had a rudder issue that caused the airplane to roll into a lot of bank. And immediately the captain put in roll control while windscreen was full of dirt, and he was pulling back, and basically had the airplane at such a high AOA that his aileron control that he was putting in was not effective. And he needed to basically, like we talked about, manage the AOA first and unload. And that would have given him the roll control with ailerons to roll wings level and then pull up. So, you have to unload, roll, and then pull.
Now, what about the 7.3 MAX events there, Dave? That was a situation where the key now, to your point, for USAir 427 was unloading, and then the 737 MAX was really all about managing energy. Is that true?
That's correct. That's correct. Those situations basically were trim nose low, and so in those situations, the elevator was not effective due to the stabilizer trim position. So when you get to that point where after the airplane was unloaded already, the lift vector was level, you needed to realize that you have various controls to pull up with, not only the elevator, but stabilizer trim. And so training specific to those kinds of airplanes, they should have used stabilizer trim as part of the pull for the recovery. And in both situations, they would have had enough altitude to recover.
They kept the power at full the entire time as well.
That's a good point, Otter. Yes, that was true. The power was not part of their thinking process at the time. So, yeah, that would have helped them out also.
Yeah, get the power back and prevent the excessive speed, which continued to aggravate the problem, right? Yeah,
that's correct.
Okay.
Otter, did you want to introduce the clip from Brad?
Yeah, let's do this. This is actually a clip from a webinar that we did with him. South African Airways had an upset event in an A340. This webinar you'll be able to get access to with the QR code that'll come up on your screen here. But we're just playing a very small portion of it. Now he's spent the last 10 minutes explaining the scenario, the situation that developed for the crew. It's in the middle of the night over the Swiss Alps, just prior to top of descent, going into Frankfurt. There, it's the captain's first solo international trip. There, he's with two senior first officers, but he had been a domestic A320 captain for 25 years prior to this. There, so he just finished his IOE. And all that, and now they're out, and they have this upset, and it's pretty fascinating how it played out. Their training that Brad, who is going to be the speaker on this, he was the one that led the UPRT training. Went back to their company. They had about 700 line pilots there, and he trained all of them and built a culture around the strategy. I remember him telling me he'd be walking down the hallway and he'd pass some line pilots and they'd look at him and go, push roll power stable. And so it was neat to hear this culture of awareness that his pilots had, and it was all done in the simulator. He put them through very extensive 4-hour sim session, and it was very effective. And the report, they had a human factors expert on this investigation of this incident, and the human factors expert directly attributed their training to saving the airplane. So why don't we play this?
So it's important to understand from the crew's perspective. This moment is 9 seconds into a startling and high-risk event. In other words, the crew had 9 seconds under extreme duress and startle to process everything that we have discussed up to this point. The application of OEB 49 caused a cascade of warnings and cautions and had a profound effect on the startle and stress effects at this critical moment. When combined with all the other complex factors that we've described up to now, it resulted in the aircraft climbing rapidly at high altitude with little automatic system protection and the safety of the flight almost completely resting on the captain, who at that stage was the only one with working displays. At this moment in the sequence, the startle and the stress effect increased significantly. The single most important and critical act that the crew performed to avert catastrophe was the upset recovery maneuver. This brought the aircraft from a state of an approach to stall and loss of control into aerodynamic stability with control. As discussed previously, the crew had high stress levels, confusion about aircraft system state, but instead of an ineffective, incomplete or absent stall recovery, they had been properly trained to apply the APS all-attitude upset recovery strategy.
Yeah, fascinating event. It's fascinating to read the report. I encourage all of you to even watch the webinar that was done on this from that QR code there. I remember him talking when they interviewed the crew and how the captain felt, because he was completely paralyzed in the seat there. He was not doing anything. It was literally the jump seater who was watching this going on, who started shouting the upset strategy. He shouted upset, push, roll, bounce. And the captain remembers when he finally heard those words, it was like it recharted, it recaged him. And he came out of his frozen state, and he started applying the recovery and saved the day. So, anybody want to comment on any of that?
I think that, the only thing I would add there, Otter, is that this topic is just so important to next generation upset training. What I mean by that is that without the centerpiece of a strategy, you're fundamentally limited to how much impact you're going to be able to have in the real world, facing real situations. You just are. And it's such an important concept that I don't think it's the attention that it deserves, because it is the doorway which through you have access to a whole other level of effectiveness when it comes to implementing upset prevention and recovery training.
And Otter, you brought out a great point in that they were paralyzed by aircraft malfunction, and they needed that trigger to get going. And so the jump seater jumped in with their strategy, and that caused them to change what they were doing. An example that we see all too often is GA pilots trying to make the impossible turn with some kind of engine malfunction on takeoff, and they get into a very high bank and basically high AOA situation, and they end up not doing anything different trying to make the runway, and that even happens in Big Iron. When you think back at the B-52 accident, air show guy in Spokane, high angles of bank, and they're trying to make the turn, and they don't do anything different when they get themselves in trouble. Or the C-17 up at Anchorage, same type of thing. High AOA, spiral dive situation. They don't go to any kind of strategy to recover from that upset. So that trigger is real important.
Great point. Looks like we got a question on there, BJ.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let me bring that in. Here we go, guys.
Can this unified strategy be used on all fixed-wing aircraft types? Can the same process be introduced in training aircraft and still be used in corporate turboprops, jets, and airliners? The short answer to all of this is yes. Yes and yes there. And it's a great question, because I think one of the things that I hope, and I think everybody on this webinar hopes as well, is that we can get an integrated approach to this from zero to hero here, i.e., get flight schools to be able to train pilots in preparation for larger aircraft as well there. And so that means training techniques and UPRT that is transferable to the larger high mass aircraft, whether jets or turboprops there. I know, BJ, this has definitely been a concern you've brought up. You want to chat quickly on that?
Well, I think the great wish of UPRT International is to start harmonizing how training is conducted. The law of primacy is just so powerful. And so if something like a unified strategy can be taught at the general aviation level, at the flight school level, like we see at United Aviate Academy, it just starts mapping into all the career path of pilots, and it's going to help the entire process. As they get more complicated, higher performance airplanes, they begin to understand this number one threat, their safety, can be mitigated by a common approach. It doesn't mean you don't consider type specific or situation specific situations, but fundamentally the mental organization falls into the same buckets. And that's really a key part of it. And I think when you have general aviation at the lower levels going off on different ways of doing things, and then at the professional level, there's a different way, it's unnecessary. And it's, I think, one of the long-term goals of UPRT International is to harmonize this approach so that we can have a system improvement to drive down this threat, which is really unnecessary. Is that what you wanted me to mention?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I see we got another one that popped up.
Let me see if I can find that question. Here we go.
What about finding oneself inverted, approaching a stall? Okay, so he's asking about a specific type of upset here, and I'm assuming he's questioning whether the unified strategy would work here. My gut answer right off the bat is yes. Does anybody else want to talk to this?
Well, think about over the top of a loop otter, I think is what he's saying. I don't think he's doing a negative G inverted stall is his question. I think you're talking about the stalling at any flight attitude. The movement of the unload from the cockpit perspective remains the same. So 100% application of the strategy in that situation.
Yes. Yes.
And if you're inverted and you unload, that actually helps the nose from falling even further and making the situation. And also when you unload, you have better roll control. So at that point, you're going to be able to roll upright more quickly, and you'll end up in a situation where you're not as nose low after rolling out either. So all those the strategy just helps you in numerous ways here.
We always talk about the steep overbank stall otter, that in addition to the unload, there's 3 reasons to unload, even in an overbank nose low where you're unstalled. To Dave's point, as you unload, you're minimizing dive angle, optimizing roll rate, which will end up ultimately reducing altitude loss. And so there's a lot of detail on how to discuss how the strategy applies beyond just the stall, but fundamentally, no matter what flight attitude you're in, unless you address the stall first, it really matters not what you do.
And I don't know if Jay has been in one like this, like he's asking about, or not. Very possible there. And I could think of a number of scenarios that could lead to something like this. But this is also one reason why we can't do comprehensive upset training in normal category airplanes.
Right.
We can't go upside down. We can't show pilots beyond 60 degrees angle bank what life is like. What can the flight controls do? What do you feel? And all that. So all attitude, all envelope capable airplanes are critical to comprehensive UPRT and to be able to learn how to apply the unified strategy.
Just like in
Otter, I think Otter, you made a great point there. I think one of the things that we have to realize is not everybody's introduced to aerobatics or even spin training as they go through their training. And so the first time they find themselves inverted, they're really not sure what to do. And so that's where having, an aircraft that's capable of doing UPRT is essential, because just read about it's not enough.
So, the one thing we talk about is we have that, that all attitude chart, Otter, where we show that licensing training, the airplane upset is only 4.9% of the all attitude envelope. And the
Mhm.
limits of licensing training to plus or minus 30 degrees of pitch and 60 degrees of bank is but 11% of the all attitude environment. And it'd be one thing if those skills transferred to the all attitude environment, but they don't. They're counterintuitive, right? As you start getting outside that window of licensing training, what you need to do to take the right action is often the very opposite of what you believe it to be. And so the counterintuitive part is really, really critical. So to your point, Otter, that's why all attitude airplanes need to be part of upset training, because there has to be a risk of and you ending up in any pitch attitude and flight attitude and you knowing how to deal with it right away. And it's just so critical. The ability and recovery, but more importantly, the awareness and prevention capability that builds is really unprecedented.
Well said, gents. I think we can wrap this up. We covered some pretty extensive or comprehensive documents there that are critical to the industry. The ICAO document, the ACs, their IATA, the International Air Transport Association, came out with their guidance material and best practices for the implementation of upset prevention recovery training. And they even propose recovery strategies as well. You can see that on page 26 of that. Well, gents, I think we can wrap it up here. I don't see any more questions. BJ, thank you for getting us going on this. Dave, Jeff, it's great being with you again on this. I'm looking forward to more of these with you. I hope this will be beneficial to a lot of folks out there as the industry continues to try to make headway in improving safety, which we can do.
All right.
I'll leave it at that. And thank you both. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this. Look forward to, we got 2 more UPRT webinars coming up this year. Is that right, Jeff?
That's correct. Huh?
Okay, great. I don't remember the date of those. So,
All right. We'll be published.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
You guys take care. Thank you for joining us.